They called him the old crossing guard. Every morning, rain or shine, he stood at the same corner. Yellow vest, stop sign, white hair blowing in the wind. The teachers smiled and waved. The parents barely noticed. The kids high-fived him on their way to class. Nobody knew who he really was. Nobody knew what he'd done, and nobody, absolutely nobody, expected him to be the only thing standing between their children and a nightmare. This is the story of Robert Chen, age 68, school crossing guard, and the man who stopped the unthinkable. Robert Chen had been working at Riverside Elementary for 3 years. Every weekday morning, 7:15 sharp, he arrived at the corner of Maple Street and Fifth Avenue. A busy intersection, 4 lanes of traffic, hundreds of kids crossing every morning. His job was simple: hold the stop sign, watch the lights, make sure the children got across safely. Simple, boring, forgettable. That's what everyone thought. "Morning, Mr. Chen." A little girl with a backpack too big for her body waved as she crossed. "Good morning, Sarah. Have a great day at school." "Thanks, Mr. Chen." This was his routine, 5 days a week, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. Minimum wage, no benefits, no respect. The principal had hired him 3 years ago. A retirement job, she'd called it. Something to keep busy. Something easy. "We just need someone reliable," she'd said during the interview. "Someone who shows up on time. Someone the kids can trust." Robert had nodded. "I can do that." He didn't mention the other things he could do. He didn't mention the 26 years he'd spent protecting presidents. He didn't mention the 3 assassination attempts he'd stopped. He didn't mention that he'd once taken a bullet meant for the leader of the free world. Because when you're 68 years old, wearing a yellow safety vest, holding a stop sign, nobody asks about your past. They just see an old man doing a simple job. It was a Tuesday morning in October when Robert first noticed the car. A dark blue sedan, tinted windows, Virginia plates. It drove past the school slowly, too slowly. Robert watched it circle the block once, twice, 3 times. His instincts kicked in, the same instincts that had kept him alive through 2 decades of Secret Service work. Something was wrong. The car stopped at the red light. Robert stepped closer, pretending to adjust his vest. Through the windshield, he saw 2 men, early 30s, both wearing dark jackets, both staring at the school entrance. The light turned green. The car didn't move. Other drivers honked. The sedan pulled away slowly, disappearing around the corner. Robert pulled out his phone and took a picture of the license plate. That afternoon, he called the police non-emergency line. "Hi, I'm the crossing guard at Riverside Elementary. I saw a suspicious vehicle this morning. I'd like to report it." The dispatcher sounded bored. "What kind of suspicious behavior, sir?" A dark blue sedan circled the school 3 times, 2 men inside. They were watching the building. Did they threaten anyone? No, but did they approach any children? No, they stayed in the... Sir, people drive past schools all the time. Unless there's an actual threat, there's not much we can do. I have the license plate number. You can file a report online if you'd like. Have a good day, sir. Click. Robert stared at his phone. They didn't take him seriously, just an old crossing guard. Probably imagining things, probably overreacting. But Robert Chen had learned a long time ago to trust his gut, and his gut was screaming that something was very, very wrong. The next morning, the sedan was back, same car, same tinted windows, same slow drive past the school. This time, Robert was ready. He watched carefully, noting every detail. The car arrived at 7:30, exactly when the most children were arriving. It parked across the street, engine running. The driver got out, tall, thin, dark jacket. He pretended to look at his phone, but his eyes kept darting to the school entrance. Robert moved closer, crossing the street to help a group of kids. As he passed the sedan, he glanced inside. The passenger was holding something. Something black. Rectangular. A tablet. On the screen, Robert could see the school entrance, a live video feed. They were recording, studying, planning. The driver noticed Robert looking. Their eyes met for just a second. Then the driver got back in the car and drove away quickly. Robert's heart pounded. This wasn't random. This was reconnaissance. He immediately walked to the school office. "I need to speak with Principal Morrison. It's urgent." The secretary smiled. "She's in a meeting right now, Mr. Chen. Can it wait?" "No, it can't." Something in his voice made her pick up the phone. 5 minutes later, Robert sat across from Principal Morrison. She was 42, kind but clearly overwhelmed with running a school of 500 students. "Mr. Chen, what's this about?" "There's a suspicious vehicle that's been watching the school for 2 days. I believe we may have a security threat." Principal Morrison frowned. "What kind of threat?" "I saw 2 men recording the school entrance, studying our routines. Our arrival patterns. Did you call the police?" "Yesterday. They said there was nothing they could do unless there's a direct threat." Principal Morrison sighed. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate your concern, but we can't lock down the school every time someone drives by. We have budget meetings, parent complaints, standardized testing coming up. Unless there's a specific, credible threat." "I'm telling you, there is a threat." "Have they made any threats? Sent any messages?" "Not yet, but—" "Then I'm sorry, but my hands are tied. I'll mention it to our resource officer when he's here tomorrow. But right now, I need you to focus on your job. Make sure the kids cross safely. That's what we need from you." Robert stood up slowly. "With respect, Principal Morrison, I've spent 26 years identifying threats before they happen. I know what I'm seeing." She gave him a sympathetic smile, the kind you give someone who means well but doesn't understand how things work. "I'm sure you do, Mr. Chen, but right now we need to focus on what's in front of us. Okay?" Robert nodded. There was no point arguing. As he left the office, he heard her secretary whisper, "Poor guy, he means well." Poor guy, means well. They thought he was paranoid, an old man with too much time on his hands. But Robert Chen knew better, and tomorrow he would prove it. Wednesday morning. 7:10. Robert arrived 5 minutes early, like always. But this time, he brought something extra. In his jacket pocket, his old Secret Service ID badge, his phone set to record, and something else, something he'd kept locked away for 3 years. A small radio earpiece, the same kind he'd worn for 2 decades while protecting the most important people in the world. He stood at his usual corner. Yellow vest, stop sign. But today, his eyes never stopped moving. 7:20, kids started arriving, parents dropped them off, teachers waved from the doorway. Everything looked normal. 7:25, Robert spotted it. The blue sedan, pulling up to the curb 2 blocks away. 2 men got out, both wearing heavy jackets despite the warm morning, both walking with their hands in their pockets. Robert's training kicked in immediately. He recognized the walk, the posture, the way they scanned the area but tried not to look obvious. These weren't random criminals. These were trained. Organized. He pulled out his phone and called 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is Robert Chen, crossing guard at Riverside Elementary on Maple Street. We have 2 suspicious individuals approaching the school, both wearing heavy jackets, possible weapons. I need officers here immediately. Sir, what makes you think they have weapons? I'm trained to recognize threat patterns. These men are showing clear pre-attack indicators. I need backup now. The dispatcher's tone changed slightly. Officers are being dispatched. Can you stay on the line? No. I need to protect the children. He hung up. The 2 men were now 1 block away, walking faster, reaching into their jackets. Robert made a decision. He stepped into the street, holding up his stop sign. Then he did something he'd never done before. He blew his whistle. Loud, 3 sharp blasts. The sound echoed across the intersection. Kids froze. Parents looked up. Teachers turned. Everyone back inside. Robert shouted, "Now! This is not a drill." For a moment, nobody moved. They stared at the old crossing guard, confused. Then Robert pulled out his Secret Service badge and held it high. Federal agent. Everyone inside the school. Lock the doors. His voice had changed, no longer the gentle crossing guard. This was the voice of someone who had commanded protection details, someone who had faced down threats in motorcades and crowd events. This was the voice of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Parents grabbed their children and ran. Teachers ushered kids inside. The principal appeared at the door, confused, then saw Robert's face and understood. Something was very, very wrong. The two men saw the commotion and broke into a run, heading straight for the school entrance. Robert moved fast, faster than a 68-year-old crossing guard should move. He positioned himself directly between the men and the school door. Stop sign held like a shield. "Stop right there," he commanded. "Federal agent. Show me your hands." The first man reached into his jacket. Robert had trained for this moment 1,000 times. Muscle memory took over. He swung the stop sign hard, hitting the man's arm. The gun, yes, it was a gun, clattered to the ground. The second man pulled his weapon, pointed it at Robert. "Get out of the way, old man." Robert didn't move. Behind him he could hear the school doors slamming shut, the locks clicking. The children were safe. That was all that mattered. "You'll have to go through me," Robert said calmly. The man's hand shook. "I said move. I've had guns pointed at me before, son, by professionals. You're nervous. Your finger's on the trigger, not the guard. You're not trained. And in about 30 seconds, this street will be filled with police." The man hesitated. That was all Robert needed. He dropped low, sweeping the man's legs. The gun went off, one shot, wild, hitting nothing. Robert grabbed the man's wrist, twisted, and the weapon fell. The first attacker tried to get up. Robert kicked his gun away and dropped his knee onto the man's back, holding him down with surprising strength. "Stay down, both of you." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Robert held both men down, stop sign still in one hand, his knee on one attacker's back, his foot on the other's chest. He wasn't even breathing hard. This, after all, was what he'd trained to do for 26 years. Protect the innocent, stop the threat, no matter what. The police arrived in under 2 minutes, 6 cars, tactical team, weapons drawn. They found 2 men on the ground, disarmed and restrained by a 68-year-old crossing guard holding a stop sign. "Robert Chen?" The lead officer stared. "You called this in?" "Yes, sir. These 2 men were conducting surveillance yesterday and today. They were armed and approaching the school with intent to harm. I've secured both weapons." He pointed to the 2 guns lying on the pavement. The officers quickly took over, handcuffing both men. One of them picked up Robert's Secret Service badge from where it had fallen. "This is real. 26 years. Retired 3 years ago." The officer's eyes widened. "You're that Robert Chen, the one who took a bullet for President Harrison?" Robert nodded quietly. Within minutes, the scene was secure. FBI was called. The 2 attackers were identified as members of an extremist group planning to attack the school. They had detailed floor plans, entry strategies, a timeline. They had been planning this for weeks, and Robert Chen had stopped them before they ever reached the door. Principal Morrison stood in the parking lot watching the FBI agents work. She turned to Robert, who was giving his statement. "Mr. Chen, She couldn't finish. "It's okay," Robert said gently. "No, it's not. You tried to warn us. I didn't listen. I thought you were just. An old crossing guard?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. Robert smiled. "I am just an old crossing guard. But I'm also someone who spent his whole career learning to recognize danger, learning to act when others freeze, learning to put myself between innocent people and harm. Why didn't you tell us about your background?" "Because I didn't want to be hired for what I used to be. I wanted to be useful for what I can still do. Stand at a corner, watch the kids, make sure they're safe." He paused. "And when I saw a real threat, I did what I've always done. I stopped it." Principal Morrison wiped her eyes. "You saved hundreds of lives today. I did my job. Both of them." The next morning, Robert Chen stood at his usual corner. 7:15 sharp, yellow vest. Stop sign, white hair blowing in the wind. But this time when the kids walked past, they didn't just wave, they hugged him. The parents didn't just drop off their children, they shook his hand, thanked him. Some cried. The teachers didn't just smile from the doorway, they stood beside him, protecting the children together. And Principal Morrison didn't just acknowledge him from her office. She stood at the school entrance, watching the man who had saved her entire school, and finally understood what valor really looks like. It doesn't wear a uniform, it doesn't carry a badge. Sometimes it wears a yellow vest, holds a stop sign, and shows up every day to do a simple job. Because heroes don't need recognition. They just need a corner to stand on, children to protect, and the courage to act when everyone else thinks they're just a crossing guard. Robert Chen worked at Riverside Elementary for 5 more years before he finally retired at 73. He never told war stories, never bragged about his past, never asked for special treatment. He just showed up every day, rain or shine, and every single child who passed his corner knew they were safe. Because the old crossing guard was watching, they called him just the crossing guard. But on the morning that mattered most, Robert Chen proved that just is the wrong word. He wasn't just anything, he was exactly what those children needed. A guardian, a protector, a hero who never stopped serving, even when nobody was watching, even when nobody knew, even when everyone had forgotten who he really was. This is Valor Chronicles, where we honor the heroes hidden in plain sight. Subscribe for more stories of quiet courage, hit the bell. Share with someone who needs to hear this, because sometimes the most important people in our lives are the ones we walk right past.